Good morning, hello, and welcome to EV Motoring. I'm Joe, and today we're going to go for a range test. We have got the 2023 Tesla Model 3 rear-wheel drive with the LFP Iron Phosphate Battery here, charged to 100%. Charged it with the Electron V-Box, link in the description. This charger, done a full review on it, pretty happy with it so far. It's available with both the J1772 plug and a Tesla plug, so whichever car you prefer. But anyway, car's charged up to 100%. Let's hop inside and talk a little more. Okay, so a little more detail about this test. We are charged to 100%. We will run it down to as close to zero as physically possible. Typically, that ends up being around 1 or 2%. We run the test at 75 miles per hour. Reason we do that here at EV Motoring is a lot of people do 70 mile per hour testing, and that's probably great for, urban areas, California, New York, East Coast, West Coast. But here in the Midwest, 75, even 80 mile per hour speed limits are common. So I think it's a lot more usable since, EVs are kind of expanding everywhere to show what a 75 mile per hour test is, because believe it or not, that little speed difference actually does make a difference in the full range test. So last week I did a cold weather, like sub-zero temperature range test with this vehicle. We got about 168 miles, I believe, was the end result. Here we have ideal conditions. It is 69 degrees right now. I have the air set to 71 degrees, as I've done with every other test, to try to keep things consistent between the other vehicles I've tested this with. I live about 1 mile from the highway, so through the magic of video editing right here, I'll show you my route plan. So we'll head out towards Rockford on I-90, and then we'll head south a little bit on, I believe it's I-39. And then once we get around 50%, we'll turn around and head back. And once I get back to the Schaumburg area, I'll kind of just do some loops on the highway as needed to arrive at the Meyer supercharger in Arlington Heights with as low power as possible. So without delaying any more, we'll hit the road, and I'll check in every 25% just to see how it's working, because sometimes a vehicle isn't 100% accurate, that you might be a little less efficient or more efficient as the battery depletes. So we try to show how that happens with this vehicle. Wind conditions, forgot to mention that, because wind is a huge difference on range. We have a 6 mile per hour wind today, so pretty negligible in Chicago standards. So really good conditions just all around to go ahead and do this range test. And being in the mid 60s with the solar heating, we'll use maybe a little bit of air conditioning, but that's almost optimum conditions for doing a range test like this. So let's go ahead and hit the highway and see how this 2023 Tesla Model 3 rear-wheel drive can do. Just checking back in, we are now at 75%. Forgot to mention, I think I forgot to mention in last week's video too, I used the Waze app to verify that my speedometer is in fact 75 miles per hour, since every car, it can vary, a mile per hour or so. So we got that, we made sure we got that calibrated in. We have used 25%, 15 kilowatt hours, 63 miles of distance covered at this point. So if we extrapolate that out, that looks like we should be getting over 230 miles of real world range, which, that's pretty much the best I've had in any vehicle I've owned. I know the Polestar was down in the low 200s, I think around 210, if I remember right. The Volkswagen ID4 was very close to 230. I forget what my exact numbers were. That was already a couple of years ago. It's impressive on the efficiency when this is just a 60 kilowatt hour usable battery pack, and we can get extreme range like this. But we'll check back in at 50%. So we're at 50%. I circled around a little bit back there because I tried to do a full loop test. So, we went west to Rockford, went south towards Bloomington, Illinois. Now we'll go north towards Beloit, Wisconsin, and then we'll head back east towards home, which is where the supercharger is. So yeah, 50% energy used. We are at 121 miles. It says 29 kilowatt hours used. It should be 30, but it might just be a little bit of BMS calibration. But all in all, we should get very close to, we should get to 60 kilowatt hours by the time it's all said and done. I love the graphs here that are provided by Tesla, so you can see exactly how your energy is divvied up between driving, climate, battery preconditioning if I was routing to a supercharger, which I won't do because typically battery preconditioning can cost a couple percent over the course of a drive depending on the weather. So I wanted to show exactly what this car can do without routing to superchargers, because not everyone's trip goes to a supercharger. Sometimes people are just going up to their lake house or something. They want to see if this car can do it. So we want to show the true furthest distance, and then you can kind of back into it if you need any other charging stops or yada yada. That's my opinion on it. Elevation, it shows that, we've benefited a little bit, or actually no, we've been hurt a little bit by elevation, but that will obviously all equal out by the time we get back home. Pretty flat land, but just a little bit of rolling hills on this route. So again, I continue to be very impressed with this. It looks like we're going to be around 240 miles, maybe even a little over 240 miles of range, which is just excellent. I haven't posted it yet, but I've taken this vehicle out from Chicagoland here, all the way out to Vegas, and then Phoenix, and then back home from there. So, stay tuned for that full road trip. It was just a great road trip vehicle, despite being the smaller battery pack. Didn't really hurt me at all. I mean, the only key takeaway there is I charge at 170 kilowatts of peak speed when I find a version 3 supercharger, rather than 250 kilowatts of peak speed. However, so many superchargers you'll encounter are actually version 2, which peak out at 150 kilowatts anyway. So because of that, you're really going to get the same charging speed. And the way I drive, I just basically add 100 miles to the battery pack and go to the next charger down the road. I typically don't charge it to almost full to then be able to skip a large distance forward. I try to just charger hop. The point of that is it charges really fast from 0 to 50%, and it takes over twice as long to get from 50% to 100%. So it just makes sense to really use that bottom half of the battery pack for a road trip. So speaking of that road trip, now would be a great time for me to ask if you're enjoying this video, please like the video. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. I have Tesla road trips that'll be coming up, coming to the channel soon, as well as there's many other EV content on there. It's not just an exclusively Tesla channel. In fact, actually, most of it is not Tesla content. I have some BMW content that's coming shortly. I used to own a Polestar, or a Polestar 2, I should say. So I did a bunch of road trips and content with that. Before that, the channel was all started with a Volkswagen ID4. So tons of road trips and content with that. Be sure to check out the other videos and stay tuned for lots more content coming. And typically the content I try to create on this channel, I try to future-proof it a little bit. I try to make videos that, a year from now, somebody can be searching for Tesla Model 3 range test, and they would find this video and it'd still be helpful. If you're looking for more current events and kind of more coverage of like news as things happen in the electric world, I invite you to check out the podcast I'm a part of. It's called the Family EV Podcast, pretty much on every platform that podcasts are available. I'm joined by regular EV dad. He's from out in the Bay Area. He has a Volkswagen ID4 and an Audi e-tron, and we kind of just talk about road trips that we've done, how his trips with his family, as well as sometimes he has dogs that come with, so kind of talks about how that works for him. And then we kind of just cover news as it comes out through the electric world, as far as cars that are coming out, or any sort of plans to build battery plants for shortages that might happen. We cover the tax credit, as far as how the recent tax credit change has greatly affected the electric car world, given a big advantage to some manufacturers and obviously hurt some of the other manufacturers. So be sure to check that out as well. And now we'll jump back into the video, and we'll see you at 25% remaining. We are now down to 25%. I put in the destination that I'm trying to go to the Meijer in Rolling Meadows, which is right by my house. It looks like we would arrive there with 10%, so I'll end up actually going all the way to Rosemont and then circling back to make sure we use up as much of that as possible. We've gone 175 miles on 42 kilowatt hours. I'm interested to see if the BMS is a little confused that it says we've used 42 kilowatt hours, but yet that's 75%. So we'll see what it ends up saying once we get to the end of this. Again, this data here is so useful, saying that almost 72% of the battery was used for driving, a little bit for climate, and so it shows that little bit of detail, shows that we've kind of now balanced out on the uphill, downhill. The rest is pretty much flat all the way back home. I forgot to mention that 6 mile an hour wind we have today is from the north, but it's as negligible as possible because it's a very small wind relative to the area. And because I go west, then south, then north, and then back east, the wind has hit the car in all four directions. So, hopefully it does. We try our best to make it as perfect of a condition as possible, but there is no perfect conditions. And, that's really the thing of when you actually go to plan your own trip, you want to make sure that you're very aware of what the conditions are. I use an app called the Windy app. I think that's very useful for seeing, between where you are and where you're going and what the winds are going to be in there, because I've certainly run into some times where I thought I had plenty of range to get somewhere and all of a sudden the wind picked up out of nowhere and certainly made me a little bit more range anxiety. So you want to be sure that you're planning your trip as best as possible, or if you're not comfortable arriving with a very low state of charge, give yourself a little more buffer just to make it more relaxing. But I'll jump back in probably around between 5 or 10%. I'll jump back in. So I just exited the highway. I am at 3%. I'm actually over by O'Hare Airport. That's one of the great things about the Tesla supercharger network, is there are so many chargers around that instead of going to the Meijer, I was able to actually just go a couple miles further down the road, get this down to a lower state of charge. I'll be arriving with, it looks like 2%, maybe it'll be 1%. Yeah, so right now we're doing 60, so we're not getting, we dipped off of that peak 75 mile per hour speed with 2% remaining. We've gone 227 miles and used 55 kilowatt hours. So we'll get to the supercharger and then check in and wrap up the video. Okay, we are here at the O'Hare Airport supercharger. Extremely busy. There's actually like no spots available, but just about to go plug in. Here's where we're at. We arrived with 2%. As you can see, the weather held pretty consistent in the mid to upper 60s most of the drive. Final numbers: 55 kilowatt hours used, 228 miles covered. Because there's 2% left, I think we can assume that we could have gotten an extra 4 miles out of it. So I would go ahead and call it 232 miles. As you can see, 97.8% of the battery consumed, which is 12.4% more than EPA estimated. And there's how it split up as far as how it was used. So almost 94% went to driving the vehicle, almost 2% to climate control, obviously no battery preconditioning. Elevation, it says we actually gained a touch there. Not sure how that's really that possible, but okay. And everything else it said was beneficial. Not sure. I don't know what that is. If I touch it, it doesn't give me any sort of detail. But nonetheless, it said we would have been about 8% more efficient had we gone 70 miles an hour instead of 75 miles an hour. And there's the uphill, downhill, which, according to this, it says 8.6% uphill, 8.8% downhill. Not sure how that is because it's pretty flat around here. But go plug in and wrap up the video. So just plugged in. Right away, the car is recommending if I would have navigated to the supercharger, the battery would have preconditioned, been a little roastier. Let's see what it ramps up to, since we are definitely power sharing. Right at 70, so 74 kilowatts right now. That makes sense because this supercharger is very full, and actually even says that the charging limit is set to 80% since it's so busy here. It doesn't want to let me charge over 80%. It would let me manually adjust that if I wanted to, or if I had a further destination down the road that needed more than 80% to get to. Tesla would also then allow you to charge above 80. But if you don't have a destination in the navigation, it'll just try to cut you off at 80% to try to get you on your way so more people can arrive here and charge. So I'm only going to take what I need to get to my parents' house where I'm hanging out today. So let me go ahead and put that in and see what it says I need. It says that that's 16 miles down the road. I have to go pick up lunch too. So yeah, it looks like I'll need to add about 10% or so just to play it safe, 10-15%. So we'll be here for probably, honestly, only 5 minutes. It's actually jumped up to 108 kilowatts of speed right now. So lucked out and maybe picked the right charger. But either way, back to the results of this range test. 232 miles of usable range at 75 miles per hour in these ideal conditions. I think that's very usable, and quite frankly, I've proven on my road trips that it's extremely usable. The charging curve is quite good on this car, getting that 170 from basically dead to around 35% and still getting above 100 kilowatts at 50%. So it allows you to really charge or hop, really kind of cover the miles pretty well. And really the biggest part to show is just the efficiency here. So this 232 miles is dead close to what I got in the Volkswagen ID4, and that had a 25% larger battery. Also was the rear wheel drive variant. So I did have the 20-inch rim, so I guess the Volkswagen ID4 with the 19s would have outperformed this. But the moral of the story is the Tesla efficiency of the powertrain makes a huge difference, because when you're getting 4 miles per kilowatt hour instead of 3, now all of a sudden your charging stops and they're charging at the same speed or a faster speed than other cars. That really cuts time off your trip, because now you need less energy at every charging stop to make it to the next one. And I invite you to go on an app called abetterrouteplanner.com if you're kind of car shopping and you want to kind of play around with what vehicle works for you. It lets you select what car you're looking at or what vehicle you're looking at. Lets you put in the rims or the trim package, or basically tailor it to your use case, and then play around with the destinations you're looking to go with your car and see if it will work for you, or if you need a bigger battery, or if you need the long range. But in most cases, this standard range really works for 90+% of people out there, just because, you know, how often do you actually use more than 240 miles in a day? And this was, like I said, highway range. You get a little bit more if you're riding around the city. The other great thing about the LFP battery here, this is a battery you charge to 100%, you know, every time, whenever you want. Typical lithium ion batteries, you want to only charge to like 80 or 90%. You don't want to charge them to 100. That can damage them. And if you did have to charge to 100, you want to kind of, if you're on like a road trip, you'd want to then go and use it rather quickly, not let it sit overnight at 100% all night. So with this vehicle, last night I plugged it in, got to 100% sometime in the middle of the night, and in fact, Tesla encourages you to charge it to at least 100% at least once a week to keep the BMS kind of, you know, accurate, for lack of a better word. It wants to be charged to 100%, and that it keeps it more accurate with how much percentage you actually have remaining in the battery pack. So much more convenient. You don't have to think about, you know, what percentage should you charge to each day. With this vehicle, just plug it in. And the new long range Model 3s are using the LFP pack too. So same scenario, just plug it in, charge it to 100%, and you have that range every single day, 250 some miles of, you know, city range every day. So very useful vehicle. You know, couldn't be happier with it right now. Looking forward to doing more range tests with other vehicles. If you're in the Chicagoland area and you have a vehicle that I have not tested, so I've done the ID4 rear wheel drive, I've done the Polestar dual motor, and now I've done the Tesla Model 3 rear wheel drive. If you have a vehicle that you would like to let me take for a range test and do some charging test or whatever, I'd really appreciate it if you reach out. All my contact information is down below. And, you know, again, if you found this video helpful, please like it. It really helps the video reach more people. Subscribing to the channel helps the channel reach more people, so I can get access to better cars and provide more and higher quality content to everyone. And take care until next time.